Okay, so welcome to today's show. I'm going to be talking about money, about how to master the game. This is especially for property investors, landlords, or business owners. This is their one today. Okay, most property investors actually think they've won the money game already. They own houses, they use leverage, and they watch their values rise over the years. But here is the dangerous truth. Property ownership doesn't mean you've mastered money at all. I'll say that again. Property ownership doesn't mean you've mastered money at all. Many landlords today are asset rich, cash poor, over leveraged, and one interest rate shock away from serious trouble. So the real question is, are you truly building wealth, or are you just riding the property cycle and surfing that wave just now? Is it just luck for you? Or was there a strategy behind it? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to break it down into 7 money rules the world's top investors use and how to use it as property investors and business owners, and you can apply it to your for the next market before the next market shift. Because if you don't master the money game, eventually the game will master you. So I want to talk about more than likely the one about it goes at the beginning is why smart property people still continue to lose money. It baffles me completely. But most people that are in property actually own assets. They understand leverage and believe that actually property is safe. Yet many are overexposed, are cash poor, but asset rich, and they haven't stress tested the strategy. That's probably one of the most important ones there. They haven't stress tested their strategy. Do you understand how to stress test your strategy? We do. Been doing it for over 30 years now. Owning property doesn't mean you've mastered money. It just means you're playing one part of this game. Now, property is actually powerful, but concentration without strategy is risky. So the real question investors actually avoid is, drum roll, if the market turns, interest rates stay high, or legislation tightens, what actually breaks first? Now, this is not anti-property, remember. This is pro-professional investing. Money mastery isn't about optimism. It's about preparation overall. So I'm going to give you 7 key steps for investors, business owners, and property people and landlords on what to do. The first step is key here. You've got to know the rules of the game. That's the key. The rules, guess what, were not designed for you. Inflation quietly rewards debt holders if cash flow survives. Remember, it's cash. Cash flow is king. Not cash is king. Cash flow is king. It's what you've got coming in. It's the lifeblood of it's your blood in your business. It's what keeps it going. You've got no cash flow, you're not going to be able to do anything. Tax is the silent expense. Fees, friction, and poor structuring bleeds returns. Emotional decisions destroy long-term wealth. This game isn't property versus stocks. It's returns versus risk versus control. From the landlord point of view, you've got to think about things like rent caps, regulatory drag when it's coming in, new legislation, Section 24. It took ages to come in, but did anybody actually plan where they're going to be? I knew under Section 24, when it first was announced, that potentially I was going to, if I made nothing, I would end up paying £6,000 in tax every year, even though I didn't make any money at all. In fact, I was actually one of the Treasury Select Committee examples. It fell on deaf ears, but we still took it to the Treasury Select Committee through Roger Mullen at the time, who was on the committee. You have to also understand the political risk is now a real asset class risk, political risk, the will of the politicians to stamp out the private landlord, possibly. Step 2 is probably key here as well. Know where you are. This is an investor reality check. Your portfolio is talking to you. What percentage of your net worth is in property? Think about that. How exposed are you to interest rate rises? Maybe interest rate reductions. You might be in a fixed rate at 7%. It might be okay just now, but what happens if all the rates start to reduce and you're still stuck with 7%? I had that before the crash in 2008. I was stuck at a 7% fixed rate. I managed to get out of it though and take advantage of the lower rates overall. What happens if your rents freeze for 2 years? What happens if everybody in your stock suddenly becomes unemployed? Can they still continue to afford your rent? That's a real risk. It could happen. Never say never. Credit crunch. Could your business survive a 20% revenue drop? Stress testing. That's what that's all about. Your portfolio is talking to you. You need to know these numbers. If you don't know these numbers, the bank actually knows them for you. Its net worth does not equal liquidity. Remember that. Capital growth does not equal resilience. That's key and fundamental to this. So step 3 is define enough, not more. Here's the 3 investor targets you should be looking at. Security is the first one. Personal security, business plus business expenses. So personal cover plus business expenses without stress. That's security, no stress. Lifestyle freedom. Do you have the choice over time? Can you choose to do what you want to do? Not just the income. You might have the income, but you might have to continue to be there to do it. There might be a point where you've got enough, where you think, I don't need to do this anymore. I can get other people to do it for me. Now, that's true passive. I don't care what anybody says, because I have that. Legacy. One of the most important things. Assets will outlive you. It's about compounded returns. And make sure it's not a burden to your family. Make sure you set it up in a legacy that will survive without you being there, and it doesn't need them to do it for you. Most investors don't fail because they aim too low. They fail because they never define what enough is. At what point? Do you just keep going? Do you just keep buying? Do you just keep working? At what point are you going to enjoy what you've got? When is enough enough? There's only so much you can make, and the rest is just for show. Are you a show person? Define that. Here's step 4. Asset allocation is key here. The property blind spots that you've got to look for. Property is an asset class, not a religion, remember. So here's key insights. Asset allocation explains more performance than asset selection. Residential, for example, does not equal diversification if you're in the residential for property investors. Geographical spread does not equal risk management. Despite the fact that you've got properties elsewhere, all over the country. It doesn't mean to say one area will be affected, because if you have a universal thing, it could happen, a credit crunch, then it's taking every one of them down. Leverage magnifies both gains and especially mistakes. Leverage magnifies gains, but more importantly, it also magnifies mistakes. Things that you've got to think about in this aspect of asset allocation is your concentration risk. Are you all in property? What happens then if you have to exit quick? Can you get out on a fire sale? Do you know what a fire sale is? A fire sale is when you've got to get rid of everything all at once. And what is the bottom line number that you'd be able to get rid of that in? Will you still have the shirt on your back if that happened? Will you actually be able to get everything all at once away? Is that entirely possible? If you've got everything concentrated, for example, in 3 houses at £1 million each, you can go, oh, I've got a £3 million portfolio. But how easy is it for you to get rid of 3 properties at £1 million each? There's not a lot of people that buy property at £1 million, is there? Whereas if you've got 30 properties at 3 million, 100,000 each, how easy is it to get rid of that? How have you spread your risk as well? If one goes down, 29 are still running and earning money. If 3's going and 1 goes down, 33% of your income's wiped out. And that's what I talk about liquidity risk, about concentration risk. There's also the regulatory risk just now. You've got the Renters Reform Act. You've also got the Housing Scotland Act. It's been updated as well for rent controls and rent control areas. Now, are they going to place rent controls in your area? Who knows? That'll be entirely up to the council to apply to the government to be able to put in rent controls in particular areas. So who knows if that's going to happen? You can't just say it won't happen. You have to stress test, if it did happen, where would I be? Are you one step away from liquidation? Your tenant risk. What profile of your tenant? Also, if your tenant loses their job, can they still continue to pay the rent? What is the local housing allowance rate for your area, for that property, for these people in that property? That's a great one to assess for a risk assessment. How much would these people get under the local housing allowance under universal credit if they lost their job and they weren't able to get another one based on their family makeup, not the 4-bedroom property? Because you could have a 1-bedroom, you could have one person, a single person over 35 years old, on their own in a 4-bedroom property, and they could be paying £1,400 a month. But if it came to local housing allowance and they lost their job, they would literally get the 1-bedroom rate. And in Fife, it's £448. 1,400, 448. See, assess risk. What happens? Oh, I'll just evict them for rent. Well, you have to wait 3 months to the 3 months rent arrears. Then you'll have to apply to the court. Remember, you're not getting rent all this time. £1,000 you're losing out on, by the way, every single month. Then apply to the court for the tribunal for the eviction, which will take 9 months after that. So you're 12 months in that. So you've lost £12,000 already, because they're only on 448 and there's 1,400. So you've lost £12,000 already. Can you afford to weather that storm? The goal isn't really owning more property. It's owning better balanced risk, protecting the downside every single time. Here's step 5 for you. Protect the downside. It's exactly what I said. Survival definitely beats growth every single time. Let me explain that about survival beats growth. Professional investors obsess over what can go wrong. Yes, I do, absolutely. Most landlords obsess over capital growth graphs. That's it. There's a difference. Professional investors obsess over what could go wrong, protect the downside. Most landlords obsess over how much capital growth have they got. I've known somebody to lose 300 properties in the credit crunch, all because they had a strategy of taking 1% of the value out of their portfolio every single year to live on. And that destroyed their business. The bank took the whole lot back in the credit crunch. Learn by other people's mistakes. It's a lot cheaper than learning it yourself. Here's the specific property risks that you've got to think about when you're looking at protecting the downside. Your void periods. Can you last long with a property empty? Repair shocks. How much money have you got set aside for things like a new roof, a new boiler, a new kitchen, a new bathroom, new double glazing, new wiring all the way throughout, because suddenly they've upgraded. You've maybe got 20 or 30 properties, and suddenly they've changed the electrical standards. And all your EICRs are up for renewal, and then you have to spend on every single one. Could you afford £30,000, £1,000 on each one? Just like that. If you can, congratulations. You're risk assessed a wee bit. If you can't, you need to understand that. I'm not saying it's going to come all the time, but you always still have to be mindful of it. Rate resets. Everybody thought rates were coming down. Suddenly, war breaks out, Iran, oil prices go up. Suddenly talk about rates not going up. Rates possibly might go up, or they'll not come down till the end of the year possibly, but they might actually go up to protect us against inflation, to curb inflation. Forced sales and downturns. What happens if the market downturns? Were you going to be forced to sell? If your loan to value is 75% loan to value, and you're still sitting at 75% loan to value, and you can't pay anything down, if there's a shock in the market and suddenly house prices dropped 10%, for example, the bank would come to you and say, we want you to make up that difference. So your loan to value is still 75%. Can you afford to make that difference up? Or are you just hoping for a wing and a prayer? You don't lose the game by missing a boom. Everybody wins in a boom. You lose it by being wiped out by a bust. Here's step 6. The psychology behind it. The hidden killer of returns. Why investors panic at the wrong time. Common mistakes. They're buying emotionally. They're holding losers too long in their stock. Now, losers could end up becoming winners, to be honest, but then you've got to assess the risk of how long it'll take to do that, remember. They're refusing to rebalance. They don't understand. They don't measure it out. They don't understand where their whole portfolio sits and what the implications of the cross-pollination between the lot of them and the complementary aspects that they have for their portfolio has for each other and the overall picture. They tend to focus on the micro rather than the macro picture, the bigger picture. Overconfidence is definitely one. It reeks all the time in familiar assets. It happens every single time. They think they've got the market. I mean, I did it in the very beginning. I've been in this for over 30 years, as I said. I've done it in the very beginning. I hit 1 million and then I got suddenly overconfident. And then the next minute, credit crunch came along. I lost 1 million. Yeah, just lose it, just like that. You get overconfident. You think you're resilient. You don't understand. Learn by other people's mistakes. It's a hell of a lot cheaper. The best property deal in the world fails if the investor can't emotionally hold it. And what I mean is behavior determines returns more than markets. Markets themselves, stock market and any other market, actually is prone to confidence. Consumer confidence and consumer sentiment mainly drives everything. House prices, stock market valuations, frenzies, AI, classic example, dot-com bubble that came along, all these crypto, all these different things. These are all emotionally based. I mean, they don't make sense on paper. But consumer sentiment drives it forward because everybody wants to get on that wagon. Everybody wants a piece. Everybody wants a piece of that pie. But as Warren Buffett says, be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful. Behavior determines returns more than more than the markets themselves. Here's the final seventh one. Cash flow equals freedom. Cash flow's king. You can buy your freedom with cash. Cash flow buys your freedom. Not capital, cash flow. What you have coming every month is more important than what your value is going up every month in wealth. It's what you've got coming in. It will set you free overall. Now, this income is really the exit strategy for you. This is the core principle. Capital growth is really theory. Cash flow is the actual reality. Now, this is all about diversification of income streams. Now, I talk about this a lot, and I get a bit like, oh my God, no, here we go again. Typical sort of furu mentality, diversify your income streams. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, for me personally, it means things like, okay, I've got an investment in property, and I get a return out of that. But I don't actually get a return. I do get a return out of it, but I keep putting it back in. I don't actually take anything out. I keep putting it back in and building it, and building reserves as well. See what that means? My day-to-day income comes from what I do, not what I have. That's my lifestyle is what I have. My day-to-day is my living. So I have a business that runs as well, estate agency, letting agency, and other avenues as well. I also have a pension fund as well, which I put into, which is UK equities. Or it's UK equity based. Some of the blue chip companies like Diageo, Glencore, and all the big blue chip stocks, it paid dividends. And that's the pension that goes aside. So I have these different diversifications in income. So if one goes down and one takes a dip, then the other one probably more than likely will go up. And then the other one will probably just stay balanced. And that's what I mean by diversification. I don't mean things like, oh, let's go into HMO and let's do student lets and let's do short-term lets and let's do mainstream residential lets. It's like that is just, for me, that is still property. You're still in property. And if it's based on value, you've had it because they'll all go down in value if there's a correction in pricing. And then that's when they come to collect the bill at your bank, come along and say, well, your loan to value is actually more than it should be. It's in your terms and conditions. I know it because I've read it. It's in every single person's terms and conditions. We want you to pay down the difference. So our loan to value is still the same, if not less. Business income versus asset income, which is so important. Like I said, that's really a key one here. And reduce reliance on any single source, your rent, your dividends, your clients, or anything like that. You reduce reliance, you diversify your reliance on one person. Like, for example, if you only had one customer, one tenant, if that tenant does something wrong, they don't pay the rent, or anything goes wrong and they can't pay the rent, then you've had it. If you've got 100 properties, for example, and 5 go down, you've still got 95% of your income coming in. Do you think you could weather a storm? Yes, possibly, if you're set up correctly. This is what I mean about diversification. True wealth is income, it keeps arriving, even when you stop. If your ability to perform was compromised one day and you weren't able to go out and work anymore, would you still be able to earn money? Would you still have money coming in? That is a huge risk. Look at people like doctors, surgeons. They hurt their hand all of a sudden. They're maybe doing some joinery at the weekend, hurt their hand. They do some joinery, hurt their hand, and then they can't do surgery. They're possibly not needed anymore. They don't have an income anymore. Barristers, solicitors need their brain. What happens if anything happens to them? What happens if they crash on their pedal bike at the weekend because they were out and they decided they wouldn't wear a helmet? That's why you should always wear a helmet, by the way, because it saved my life, definitely, when I crashed. But and then they can't think properly, so their ability to perform is compromised. Their income's wiped out. A pilot have to pass certain physical tests every single year, I think. So what happens if the physical test isn't passed? They are no longer a pilot. They are no longer earning. And that's what I mean. True wealth is the income keeps arriving, even when you stop. So that's the 7 steps, I would say, overall, in terms of what to look for in terms of your strategy in Investors Edition. Let's just finish off here and conclude. I would say property isn't the strategy, you are. Property is a powerful tool. It can do a lot of things, but you have to make sure and oversee it and understand the risks and the rewards and how to analyze it and risk analyze it and do probability analysis. But tools need systems too. So your properties need a system as well. This is why I'm a big fan of using letting agents. Not because I'm a letting agent, but I think if you're earning a lot more and you're really good at what you do and you could earn a lot more in your day-to-day job, then you should go and do that rather than actually trying to dabble in property. Let the experts deal with it. How much are they each month in comparison to what you could earn? Do you really want to learn all the legislation? Do you know the legislation? I think 95% of landlords probably don't know the legislation in full. Because I see most of them posting on Facebook with adverts, and the first thing I don't see is the EPC rating and then also the land registration number. Yet how far are we down the road on land registration? Years. Over 10 years. All this was meant to be documented in adverts when you put an advert on. You're supposed to have your land registration number and your EPC rating of your property. I don't see it in most private landlords' adverts. It's a legal requirement. So this is what I mean about systems, having the right system, having the right people behind you. But systems also need discipline. So you need to be disciplined all the time behind that system. The mistake isn't really owning property. It's assuming property alone equals security. Here's the final investor challenge for you. I'll leave you with this. You need to audit your exposure. If you don't know how to do that, give me a shout. Happy to go over that with you. You need to stress test your assumptions on your portfolio. And you need to stop confusing growth with safety. It is not. Master the money game, or eventually the game will end up mastering you. And that's it. So reassess your portfolio, concentration, review leverage and cash buffers, diversify income streams, educate before the next cycle turns. Now, the key, and I'll leave you with this. This is a perfect example of what to remember. This is the key phrase that pays. The next downturn will reward preparation. It won't reward confidence. Preparation is the key. And on that note, thanks for tuning in. If you need any more questions, please feel free to message me direct on this post. Until next time, guys, I'm Jim Parker.